Curious Lloyd.
Are you an atheist? If so, that's totally cool. While a lot of people act like atheism is showing the responsibility that comes with religion in order to waste time wearing black clothes and getting to third base with unmarried demons or whatever, it actually means taking up a few unforeseen hardships. For example, everyone thinks atheists are immoral, even atheists. Let's start with the fact that everyone apparently thinks atheists are the scum of the earth, according to many surveys anyway. I don't particularly believe in God myself, so I'm just as disappointed by this news as anyone. And while I'd love to hold this up as an example of believers being plebs, those same polls show that even atheists hate and mistrust other atheists. Even I can't wrap my head around the idea of someone having a moral code without a higher power to enforce it. To determine how this anti-atheist bias works, researchers asked 3,000 people in 13 countries the most reasonable question ever. If there was a person who used to torture animals as a child, then they grew up and became a teacher who murdered a bunch of homeless people, would you figure this person an atheist or religious? Across the whole study, people were twice as likely to suspect the killer of being an atheist. Even atheists believed that the person was more likely to be an atheist. In a second study which polled Canadians and Americans, participants were asked to imagine a hit-and-run driver fleeing and hitting a parked car, and then later finding a wallet and stealing all the money. They then asked the participants if the said person was more likely to be a teacher or an atheist teacher or a rapist teacher. Your first tendency here might be to wonder why, in both this example and the previous one, all the persons are teachers. Maybe people aren't biased against atheists as much as they just hate teachers. The second takeaway here is that yes, people suspected the driver of being an atheist over a rapist. Over a goddamn rapist. Come on. Atheism is still political suicide. If the year 2017 taught you nothing else about politics, it should be that politics is worse than having a paper cut. We've experienced financial stupidness, sexual harassment and assault, enough lies to choke a circus elephant, and more childish insults than a roast battle at a daycare. People all over the world will officially tolerate anything from politicians, except atheism. In the grand scheme of things people hate from their elected officials, it looks like atheism is getting close to the last straw. 37% of people would less likely vote for a politician who had an affair, and 41% would be less likely to vote for one who had financial problems. But 51% would be less likely to vote for an atheist. A bankrupt philanderer could become a prime minister or president if he claimed to be a Christian. Can you imagine? What a world. A Gallup poll suggests that 58% of Americans would be willing to vote for an atheist candidate. And while that number sounds promising, the polls also show that only a socialist would have less support at 47%, and a Muslim candidate would only have 60% support, while a gay candidate comes in at 74%. So for the socialists and atheists out there, who were hoping for a like-minded government someday, it looks like we'll probably be colonizing Mars before that happens. Atheists make everyone think of death. If you're a religious sort of person, what comes to mind when you think of an atheist? Is it some sort of smug Rich Dawkins kind of guy trying to explain the miracle of magnets to you with so-called science? Or is it the cold, grim hand of death? I can imagine it's the second one, and also the first one, but mostly that second one, since atheists just make everyone think of the Reaper, apparently. This, as you can imagine, does not improve people's attitudes towards them. Researchers found this out via studies that began with putting subjects in a morbid mindset with questions like, what's going to happen to you after you die? Another group was asked dark but non-death related questions. Everyone was then asked their opinions on Quakers and atheists. As expected, everyone thought the first group was just smug people and had much darker thoughts about the second one. But while there were negative views on atheists across the board, the subjects who were focused on thinking about death really hated them. A second study just had people do some fill-in-the-blanks fun. After being asked to think about atheism, pain or death, the atheism and death crowd both filled their blanks with gloomy, morose stuff, with the study concluding that the very idea of atheism is existentially threatening to a ton of people. So if you're an atheist and you find yourself on the shit end of some evangelical hatred, it's only because your entire being threatens not just that person's existence, but their entire understanding of said existence. You literally cause people to question their fabric of reality. Atheists aren't as open-minded as you think. If you had to guess who is more open-minded between atheists and religious people, you'd probably choose atheists, without even putting much thought into it. Conservative tends to be synonymous with religious, and liberal goes hand to hand with atheist. Well, hold on to your non-denominational asses, because it looks like there are some circumstances in which atheists tend to be more rigidly dogmatic than their happy Christian counterparts. Now, don't go writing letters to your representatives at committees about what a lying arsehole I am, because odds are, they're probably more of a lying arsehole anyway. But I'm also citing a study which does support the notion that when it came to subtly measure the inclination of integrated views that were diverging and contrary to one's own perspectives, it was the religious who showed more openness. The point of the study was mostly to show that the close-mindedness is not the exclusive purview of the religious, and that atheists can actually become so dogmatic in their disbelief that anything that challenges the lack of their belief will be met with more rigidity than information which may challenge their beliefs of someone who is religious. In short, everyone loves to put their fingers in their ears and shout, "Nah, nah, I can't hear you," sometimes. Atheists might die sooner. There's evidence to suggest that religious people who regularly attend church have a longer lifespan than people who don't, like a friendly neighborhood atheist. So the people who believe there's something after life have to wait longer to find out than the people who don't, on average. That's a final insult for someone. You just need to decide for whom. A study of 75,000 middle-aged nurses in the United States showed that participants who regularly attended church services over a 20-year period, as in one a week, had a 33% lower risk of dying during the study period than those who didn't. Well, Jesus saves. Maybe. The thing to keep in mind with this research is that it isn't exclusively faith that's keeping anyone alive. The same data shows that countries that are much more religious overall, such as places in sub-Saharan Africa, still have much higher mortality rates than the US conversely. More secular nations like Japan have a higher life expectancy overall. So what's the point? It's in the difference between the two. People who are not religious in the world are, as every other entry follows here, walking arseholes in the eye of everyone else. That special brand of ostracism places atheists, by and large, outside of social involvement. If you're not trusted as a politician, if you're not able to engage in charitable and community outreach projects, because most of them are organised by churches and religious people, if people assume you're a rapist teacher, then you don't have that same support base as religious people. On average, you don't have the encouragement of others, or a ton of organised people who will take an interest in your welfare, and you would if you lived in a mainly secular nation, where many of these community groups are also secular and atheist, and more accepted as part of the community. Is the conclusion here that religious people are inadvertently killing atheists? I never said that, and neither did you. But you can conclude that in a nation that leans more towards religion, those who do not partake have social disadvantages that the majority does not take into account. The majority just wants them to burn into a hell they don't even believe in, which they'll get to slightly earlier.